In time I tell you, life puts on me, it controls everything around me. Singing tala big it's tala big yeah. In time I tell you, life puts on me, it controls everything around me. Singing tala big it's tala big yeah.
Welcome into episode number 8 of Gamblers Anonymous. On this episode, we're going to be talking about Wimbledon and the odds to win Wimbledon. It started just a couple hours ago, so we're going to see who's the favorite to win Wimbledon. This year, of course, Djokovic the favorite. We'll also talk one of my favorite topics, the over-unders. This time, it'll be for the college football season coming up. Vegas and different sportsbooks just released them. Just last week, I believe on Monday last week is the earliest I saw them. I'll go over the most interesting teams, the ones that I see as sure things, and we'll also be talking, of course, my baseball picks of the day. I did awful last week. I believe I went 2-5. So the week before I went 9-5. Last week I went 2-5. So you can see how up and down it is when you're trying to pick those. So, and we'll talk a little bit of basketball. I'm not going to go over any odds or anything, but I'm just going to talk about I'll talk about who improved their chances to win the title, who improved their odds the best at the draft, and who's going to improve their odds the most in free agency. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And so let's get into it. I want to start off with Wimbledon. Of course, tennis being one of my favorite sports, and also it's the most pertinent right now, just because of, it just started right now, 2-week event, and of course, every year, every major, there's about 4 or 5 guys that realistically have a chance to win it, it feels like. But we just saw at the French Open, Stan Wawrinka kind of stunning the world and beating Djokovic and winning that title. And he managed to get over 2 major humps in that tournament. He beat Roger Federer, and he also beat Novak Djokovic in that final. So, and Djokovic, a lot of people thought was unbeatable. And Stan has always struggled with Federer, but he found a way. So you never know what's going to happen in these tournaments. Wimbledon's more of a more of a fast-paced court, I guess you could say. Grass is a little more fast than clay, which is a little less fast than, and grass is a little less fast than the hard courts, Australia and U.S. But we also want to look at, so I should say that there's a few other guys I think that have a chance other than the big 5 that I was saying. Of course, there's the Djokovic. So realistically, people who have a chance: Djokovic, Andy Murray, Roger Federer, Stanislav Wawrinka, Rafael Nadal. But I think that there's a couple others that you can get even better value on. Guys like Grigor Dimitrov, Thomas Berdych. Kyrgios is questionable because he's still so young. He's still raw. But we remember he had that great run last year. I don't think Raonic realistically is ready yet. And Cilic he's on and off. I'm not sure if he can make the full run. Tsonga, I think, is pretty good value for where he is. Nishikori, I don't think he can win it all yet. He's another young guy. I'm not sure he's there yet. Then you get to the big servers: Isner, Anderson, Richard Gasquet. I don't think any of them can put together the type of tournament that it takes to win the entire thing. And then you get to the long shots, and of the long shots, I'm not sure there's anybody I put my money on. Gael Monfils, on grass, I don't like him as much. Guys like Ernest Gulbis, same type of thing. He's young, and on grass, I'm not sure. Jerzy Janowicz, big server, but he's so inconsistent, I can't put anything on him. So the guys that I mentioned at the top are the guys that we really want to focus on. And Novak Djokovic, of course, is the favorite at 11-8. relatively heavily favored. To be honest, Andy Murray's next at 2 to 5, at 5-2. That surprises me. That he's favored over Roger Federer, who's 13-2. Of course, Roger Federer is the king of grass, the king of Wimbledon. I know he's old. He's getting up there, and he's struggled at his last, couple of years, quite frankly, at majors. But Andy Murray is good on grass. He does deserve to be one of the favorites. I'm just not sure if I'd have him above Roger Federer or not. Stan Wawrinka at 12-1 seems about right. And then Nadal's at 20-1. I might have him even farther back, quite frankly. I don't see Rafael Nadal. If he couldn't win at the French, I can't see him winning, at Wimbledon. And then Grigor Dimitrov, he's the one I really like at 33-1. I really consider putting something on that. Because after him, all the guys after him are more inconsistent. You've got Nick Kyrgios at 50-1, Martin Cilic at 50-1. If you want to put something on Tsonga, I could understand that at 50-1. Because if he can stay healthy and play the way he was playing, at the French, because he's got a bigger serve and a bigger forehand, maybe put something on Tsonga and hope he can play consistent tennis. He's at 50-1. But other than those guys that I mentioned at 50-1, I think that Grigor Dimitrov is great value. He's still a young guy. He plays his best tennis on the faster courts. Great serve and volleyer. I like the 33-1 odds for him, and I like his chances in this tournament. I liked him last year, but he was still younger. Another year under his belt. I could see him making a run. Do I see him winning it? Probably not, because it's probably going to be one of those big four guys that I mentioned: Djokovic, Murray, Federer, Wawrinka. But realistically, I could easily see Federer getting knocked out at some point, kind of early on a fluke or something, just because that's how he's been playing lately. Wawrinka, similarly, he had an incredible run at the French, and he plays very, very good tennis on grass and on hard courts. He plays well, but he's the type of guy who could get knocked out. Who could just play an off match against just about anybody. That's always been the question: is can he stay consistent? It's never been a talent question; it's always been a consistency question. So if those two get knocked out, who's to say Dimitrov couldn't make the run? And could he beat a guy like Andy Murray? I wouldn't be stunned if he pulled that one off. So I like Dimitrov for the value. If I had to pick the entire tournament straight up, everybody's gonna pick Djokovic, of course. I'll stay away from Djokovic, and I'll say that I don't know. I don't think Stan wins back to back. I don't know that Murray. I don't know that I trust anybody. You know what? I'm just gonna go with Dimitrov. He's gonna be my pick to win Wimbledon. Whether or not it's a good pick, we'll find out. He's at 33-1 odds currently. It's a bold pick, I admit it, but I like Dimitrov. I like the way he's played the last couple of years. I like the way he's always played. So that's who I'm going to go with on the men's side. On the women's side, it's less interesting. Yeah, of course, there's Serena Williams, and then you've got the Azarenkas of the world, and blah. But quite frankly, I think Serena's going to take it. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, of course. There's Sharapova, there's others, and Serena's getting up there in age, so that's why some people seem to think that Serena can be overtaken. I don't tend to think it's going to happen just yet. I think Serena stays on top. The odds aren't great for her, of course. She's heavily favored to win it all, but I still think I don't think there's a smart bet out there that isn't Serena Williams. So I'm going to stick with Serena for that one. Let's move to college football and the over-unders for the upcoming season, because I always find them very fascinating. I find them to be over-unders are one of the most interesting things, especially when it's preseason over-unders, and it's this far in advance. You get some gimmies on the board. And you also, it's interesting to see what Vegas is thinking about different teams this early in the off season. So I'm looking at it. I'm going in alphabetical order, of course. That's the way it's listed for me. You can do it by conference, you can do it in whatever order, but I have it in alphabetical order here. And I'm just going to go through the teams I think are interesting. So I'm going to skip teams like Air Force Akron just so you get a hint on it. Um, Alabama's the first kind of interesting one. They're at 9.5, and the odds say that they're probably going over. This over is a slight favorite there, and I would jump on the over. I think they win 10 games. I do think they'll probably lose one in there, but I don't know that they lose two. I think I'd jump on the over on 9.5 for Alabama. Arizona State's at 8.5. Of course, they lost a few guys in the draft. They had a great year last year, but they do play in that tough conference. I think that they probably win 8, maybe even 7 games, so I'm going to say Arizona State goes under. That's a low confidence on that one. Arkansas, surprisingly, is at 8.5. Arkansas, has always kind of struggled because they're in such a tough conference as the SEC, with teams like Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Missouri, all those great teams who are always good. 8.5 seems like a lot, so I'm going to say they go under, even though they've been improving every single year. So could they pull the over? Yes, but they'd have to pull quite a few upsets in their in some of those matchups I mentioned. So I don't see them getting the over. We go to Auburn. Auburn at 8.5 is stunning. I would jump on the over on Auburn. They always get a great recruiting class, and 8.5 games just seems like kind of a disrespectful for a team that has, like I said, a great recruiting class, and their toughest game is Alabama, of course. But other than the Iron Bowl, I'm not sure how many games they lose. Even if they lose one more, they'll still be over. I would jump on the over for Auburn. Baylor's at 10. That's kind of surprising to me. They play 11 games, so could they lose to TCU? Yes, but who else would they lose to? By the way, these win totals are for regular season only, so the bowl game doesn't matter, and the conference championship game doesn't matter. Just so we're all on the same page. So Baylor at 10, they play 11 games. I think they do lose to TCU, and I'm almost certain about that. I know that they beat them last year, but I think they lose this year because TCU kept so many of their best players, including the quarterback there. So I think that they lose to TCU, and therefore I'd go with the under, just based on the chance that they lose to another team, maybe a West Virginia or something. But I think that they'll lose one more game. Boise State is at 9.5, so they'd have to lose 2, and I'm going to also say they go under. That one's a very tough one because their schedule is also pretty easy, but I'm going to go with the under there. BYU at 8.5. 8.5 seems like a lot for a team like BYU, so I'm going to jump on the under there. I would jump on that. BYU, I could easily see them winning 7 games, but I'm not sure about 8.5. That seems like a lot to get them to 9 wins, 9-2. I just don't see BYU doing that. California at 5. That seems disrespectful for California. I would jump on the over at 5. Even if they win 5, you don't lose. You get your money back. So I'd jump on it just for that reason. I like the over with 5 wins. Then we get to Duke's at 7. 7's an interesting number for a Duke team that's, not a traditional football powerhouse, but they've really been improving year after year, getting into bigger and bigger bowl games. I like what they've done. 7 wins. I think that they get more. I think they get 8 or 9 out of this team this year, when Florida State's going to be taking a step back now that Winston's gone. They lost a lot of their speed as well at the receiver positions the last couple of years. So I don't think I think Florida State's going to take a step back. I think Duke takes another step forward. So 8 or 9 wins for Duke. Florida at 7.5. Florida's really fallen apart the last couple of years. They always get decent recruiting classes, but it feels like they just haven't put it together the last couple of years. 7.5 in a tough conference. I think that they go under, quite frankly. So under again for Florida. Florida State at 9.5. I mentioned Jameis Winston being gone, some of that speed being gone. They're still a good team. they'll still find a way to pull 7 or 8, but I don't see, or even 9, but I don't see them going over the 9.5 mark. I'd pick the under for Florida State. Georgia's at 9. That kind of surprises me. That's a tough one. I don't like the even numbers. I like the halves, 9.5, 8.5. Putting Georgia at 9 makes it very difficult. I probably go with the under because I'm not sure that they can pull a 10th win out. I mean, I think 9's right on the button of what they can do, but I don't see them getting that 10th win because that would be very difficult in a tough SEC. You get to Georgia Tech at 7.5. I would jump on the over for Georgia Tech. Running that triple option, it doesn't matter what players they plug in; they're always going to find a way to win games. Remember, they played Florida State really tough last season. They're always good. They were ranked for a good portion of last season. I think they pull maybe even 9 wins out with a relatively easy schedule as well. Illinois at 3.5 is interesting. A Big Ten team. Illinois has had good teams in the past. They've just been on a downward spiral recently. So to 3.5 is seemingly disrespectful. I'd say over. I think they find a way to get 4 wins in a very easy Big Ten. Of course, they're one of the easy teams, but I don't see them losing 8 games. I mean, that would be a pretty bad year. Then you get to Kansas, 1.5. Kansas officially is the lowest team on the board in terms of win expectancy. 1.5 wins. It seems very disrespectful, but Kansas, of course, is probably the worst team in college football or in Division I college football. If you pick over, you're not going to win that much money. The over is heavily favored. Still, I think that they find a way to pull 2 wins out. It's not like they have a really difficult schedule. They're not in the SEC, so I think that they can get 2 wins. I'm gonna feel comfortable saying they find a way to get 2 wins out of their schedule. You get Louisville's at 7.5. Not really that interesting. That's a tough one to pick, quite frankly. LSU at 8. LSU, a traditional powerhouse, always good recruiting classes. They had another good one this year. 8's tough because, I think Auburn and Alabama are still better than them. And maybe Georgia's better than them. I'm going to say, if I had to pick one, I'd say over. I think 8's a very good number for them. But I'm not quite sure, so if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with the over. Then you get Michigan State at 9.5. People are jumping on the over right now. If they win 9, that would mean they'd lose 2 games. I think that they're almost guaranteed to lose to Ohio. I think Ohio State's just so good that I think Ohio State beats them. But then, is there another team that can beat them realistically? I don't know who else it would be. I'd probably pick the over, but I wouldn't feel that safe about it. I don't think it's a very safe pick. But I do think over is a better bet than under. Michigan at 7.5, jump on the under. They are not winning more than 7.5 games. Michigan, with John Harbaugh, with Jim Harbaugh, they feel like they have the coach of the future, and full credit to them for getting him. And he's gonna bring them back to a high standard. They're going to play well in a couple of years. They're not ready to win 8 games yet. That team's just not good enough to win 8 games yet. I don't see that happening. 7.5, I'd jump on the under. Mississippi, Ole Miss, 8.5. I think I'd go with the under on that just because of all the SEC teams I already mentioned. The SEC is just so loaded that I don't see them winning more than 8.5 games. In that conference. Missouri's at 7.5. See, and I just mentioned all the SEC teams, but I think Missouri goes over. This is a team that routinely wins the easier SEC West. So, do I think that they can pull it out again? Yeah, it's possible because it's a lot easier than the the conference, or not the conference, the division with Alabama and Auburn. So I think Missouri can be good again and get over 7.5 wins. Um, Nebraska at 8 is eight's a perfect number for Nebraska. They're one of those teams that, they're decent, but they're not great. Will they lose 3 games? Probably. Will they lose a 4th? I don't know. I'd say over on Nebraska, even though I think 8's a perfect number for them. Notre Dame's at 9. I'd go under on Notre Dame. I don't think that they're going to be as good as last year, and I could see them losing 3 or 4 games in there. So I think under for Notre Dame is the number. Ohio State is at 11, and by the way, they opened at 11.5, but it went down to 11 after heavy money was going on the under. But at 11, does anybody see them losing 2 games? So let's say they lose to Michigan State. Is there any chance that they lose to any other team on their schedule? I don't think so. So I pick the over, quite frankly. I think there's a higher percentage chance that they go undefeated than there is that they lose 2 games in there. Because, they're just so good and their schedule's so bad. That's a perfect, kind of trap. Oregon's at 9.5. Of course they lost Mariota, but they're going to find a way to be good again just because of the way they run that offense and the way they run that team. They have a relatively easy schedule. 9.5 wins is, tough to get, but that's a tough one. I'm going to go with the under, even though I'm not too comfortable with it, but I think that they lose a couple of games in there and go under 9.5. Some other interesting ones. Penn State's at 7.5, which is interesting considering that they, Christian Hackenberg, their quarterback, a lot of people expect him to be the number 1 pick in the draft. And for that reason, I think I'm going to say over. I'm not too comfortable with it because I think the rest of the team isn't great, but I think that they can find a way to go over 7.5 wins if he's as good as advertised. The South Carolina Gamecocks, they're at 7. They've kind of fallen off a cliff in the last couple of years. I'm not sure if they can get up from it. 7's a good number for them. I think that's almost a goal point for them. I'm going to go under, but I'm not too confident in it, but I'm more confident that they'll win 6 than I am that they'll win 8. So for that reason, I'm saying under for South Carolina. Stanford's at 9. I'm going to go under for Stanford. I think that Stanford's a good team, not a great team anymore. I think Andrew Luck kind of brought them to prominence, and they're riding that. And Hogan was a good quarterback for them as well, but I still think they go under 9 wins. I think that's a lot for them. TCU is at 10. They're other than Ohio State. Them and Baylor are both at 10. Those are the only teams in double digits. 10 wins for TCU. Realistically, there's only 1 game on their schedule that I'm worried about, and it's Baylor. Other than that, do I think that they lose another game? Probably not. They're just so talented. They got their quarterback Boykin back. He's going to be a Heisman candidate, quite frankly. He's probably my early pick to win it. He and Cardale Jones are going to be up there. Ezekiel Elliott as well is going to be up there. So Ohio State has a couple of candidates, but I think Trayvon Boykin's going to be there at the end. I'm going to say over for TCU. I don't think that they necessarily go undefeated, but I think there's a better chance they go undefeated than there is that they lose 2 games on that easy cupcake schedule of theirs. So over 10 wins for TCU. UCLA at 9.5, I would jump on the under. I don't think now that they don't have Brett Hundley, even with Hundley last year, they struggled at certain points. I don't see them winning 10 games without Hundley. So I would jump on the under for them. USC at 8.5. USC had a great recruiting class. They've had rough points in the last couple of seasons, but when they play their best, they're a good team. I would jump on the over for them. Those last 2 picks, for me, are pretty easy with UCLA and USC. Utah's at 7.5. I like the over, but just barely. I think that they can find a way to win 8 games, but I think it's going to be tough. Similarly, Utah State is at 8, and I think I would pick the under, but just barely. I like Utah State, but I don't love them, so I think that they probably win 7 games in there, but I'm just not sure. Vanderbilt is at 3. I think I'd pick they're in the SEC, so they're going to win like 1 conference game at best, maybe 2. But I don't know how many out of conference they win. I'm going to say I'm going to say under 3 wins, and I feel bad saying it. I don't like picking unders when the number's that low, but I'm just not sure who they beat in the SEC. I mean, they don't beat Georgia, they don't beat LSU, they don't beat Alabama, they don't beat Auburn, they don't beat Arkansas, they don't beat Missouri. Who do they really beat in there? I don't know who they beat, so I'm going to say under, which feels disrespectful. They're going to have to do well out of conference and then, try to pull 1 or 2 wins in conference out of their butts. Virginia Tech is at 8. That's respecting Virginia Tech a lot. Virginia Tech was a bad team an average team at best last year that kind of rose to prominence, I guess you could say, because they were the one team that beat the national champions. But they beat Ohio State when Ohio State was not that good at the very beginning of the season. Second game for Ohio State. They're not that good of a team. Their recruiting class is average. I'm going to say they go under 8 wins. I think 8 wins is a lot for them. That's kind of a benchmark for them that I think they're going to try to reach, but I don't see them getting to 8. And then last but not least, we'll go to Wisconsin, who was at 10 wins. That's a staggering number for Wisconsin, a team that is a good team. They're a very good team. I think that they can even get to the conference championship game again and face Ohio State, but that doesn't matter. I still think they only win 8 or 9 games. I don't think that they win 10. Their schedule's easy, of course, because they're in the Big Ten, and they're not in Ohio State's section and Michigan State's section, but I still think that they lose 1 or 2 games in there. They play Alabama the very first game of the season, so they're going to lose the very first game of the season, and then from there, if they can get to 10, that would be pretty incredible. So I would jump on the under for Wisconsin on that one. And so that's it for these. I only went over the ones that I found most interesting, kind of the top tier teams in there. If there's some others that I missed, you can mention them to me, but for now, that's who I like and who I don't. The ones that I said jump on, if you feel like putting money on it, feel free to do so. I'm probably going to put money on a few of those. That Wisconsin pick is calling my name on the under. I don't understand why their number's set at 10, but I'm going to jump on the under there. There's a few others in there, USC, UCLA. I really like those 2 picks. So I'll probably jump on a few of those, but as the season pulls near, we'll talk more about college football, but that's all that I'm talking about on the issue for now. So, stay tuned for that. We'll jump to basketball a little bit. I talked last week about odds. I believe it was last week. I talked about odds to win the championship. I talked about how the Lakers have way better odds than they should, but the reason that they have that is because they're going to pick up some free agents, and they got a good draft pick. They had the number 2 pick at the time. Now we know it's D'Angelo Russell. When I look at the odds, I haven't looked at the changes yet, but I'm going to give my 2 cents based on the draft, who kind of improved their odds, why. So I like Justice Winslow. I don't think that he should have gone higher or anything like a lot of people do, but I like him sitting with the Heat now. I like him on the Heat now because he's assuming that the Heat can stay healthy. I like their odds now that they have him. They have Goran Dragic, assuming that they can keep him. They'll have Dwayne Wade, assuming they can keep him. Chris Bosh, Hassan Whiteside. I like that team overall, the way they're built. 6 or 7 legitimate players. Will they beat the Cavaliers or anything? I doubt it. But they have the type of team that if they're healthy, and that's going to be a question mark, and if they can keep it all together, another question mark. But with regardless of the question marks, do I think that they're a good team? Yes. Do I think that they can compete in the Eastern Conference? Absolutely. And so I like what they did in the draft, getting Justice Winslow. I think that's a smart play, and a good job by them. Other teams, of course, the Lakers getting D'Angelo Russell's great, and I mean the Timberwolves getting Karl Anthony Towns is great. But the Timberwolves are probably 3 or 4 years away from being great. Towns will be very good in 2 to 3 years. Wiggins is just getting better year after year, and I can see him being a great player, a 20-plus point per game guy in the next couple of years. Then they need 1 or 2 more pieces to be a legitimate playoff team in the West, and then, keep building from there. The Lakers, of course, are going to get a big-name free agent. The question is, which one will they get this offseason? I think they have a good chance at DeAndre Jordan, but I think DeAndre Jordan probably goes to the Mavericks at this point. I think that they have a decent chance at Aldridge. If you ask me right now, people keep talking about Aldridge going to the Spurs. I actually think Aldridge has a better chance going to the Lakers. I don't even love him on the Lakers necessarily. I'm a Lakers fan. I don't even really want him that much because he's 29 years old. He's not as athletic as Jordan. He's not as young as Jordan. But I think that there's a pretty good chance that the Lakers land him. I would like to get Love, but I don't see the Lakers getting Love. I think he stays in Cleveland for 1 more year at least. So if I had to pick the guy that the Lakers are going to get, I think it's going to be Aldridge. But we'll see what happens. If they don't get him, they'll probably make a play at guys like Jimmy Butler, DeMarre Carroll, guys like that. But I think that there's a good chance they will get LaMarcus Aldridge, and then next year they'll make a play for Kevin Durant once Kobe's money's off the book. So if you were going to bet who's going to win the title in 2 years, I think that the Lakers have a good chance. They're not going to win it next year, though, of course. But we'll see which free agent they get. But I do like what they've done. They have Russell, they have Kobe for 1 more year, of course, and maybe he plays next year alongside a guy like Durant. They'll have a big guy inside. It depends on who it'll be. Other picks, the Sixers had an interesting decision to make. Once the Lakers took Russell, they had to decide whether or not to take Okafor. They decided to do it. Some people ripped him, some people loved it. I kind of actually didn't love it. I understand that he's the best player available. I would have probably traded him. Maybe they still will. And if they do, I think it's a smart pick. Or a smart pick, smart play. But if they keep him, I'm just not sure. They're going to have to trade somebody. And Embiid and Noel, their value is not that high right now. Those guys have to prove that they can stay healthy. The only guy of the 3 whose value is pretty high is Jahlil Okafor, and I'm not sure how much teams will trade for him right now. So you have to pray that those guys play well next year so their trade value goes up. I'm not sure how well they'll play. That's the thing about this, is that it all depends on who they trade and how much they get for the trade. So I'm not sure how well it'll work, but the Sixers are not getting that much better in the near future, and that's the reason I'm not sure I like it, or I like what they did. If they really had to, they should have traded back for an established player or a couple of established players who are still young enough to make an impact in a couple of years. But what realistically could that team do? They've been a debacle for a while now. Other teams, the Celtics made a couple of odd picks. One of them, they've actually made a couple of good picks late, but their first pick, Terry Rozier, a lot of people shook their heads at that one. He's a guard who can't really shoot. He's explosive inside, but they've already got Isaiah Thomas. They've already got Evan Turner. They've got a ton of guards on that team that can play. Marcus Smart, who do the same things as Rozier, so a lot of people were shaking their heads at that pick. I don't love it either. There are a few guys there that they could have taken instead. They did get a shooter. They got Hunter later on, so credit to them for getting a shooter, but they're still not in a place where they're ready to contend in the Eastern Conference. And then other than that, the Spurs took a foreign player, color everybody shocked. And so I think that they'll find a way to develop him, and he'll probably be a great player in a few years, but nobody had heard of him coming in. Um, Other than that, there's not many teams that made huge splashes. Um, it was a pretty standard draft, a couple of trades in there, nothing too major. The things basically stay still after the draft is done in terms of the odds. And of course, Cleveland is still the favorite to win it all, so we'll see what happens with that. But I do think that the Heat made good strides. I think the Lakers like what they did. Of course, the Timberwolves are building for the future, so they like what they did. So we'll see what happens with all of that. But I'm excited for the upcoming season and for free agency, which is about 24 hours away, a little more than 24 hours, at like 36 hours away. So that should be fun. Let's jump to, and then the last thing we're gonna talk about is my picks, my baseball picks of the day. Last week I really struggled. I went 2-5. It was a bad day for me last week, I admit it. I always pick with the pitchers. That's usually my thing. But last week it really just didn't work for me. Some of them got hammered. It just didn't work. That's the truth of the matter. So let's start with my picks today. I'm hoping to do a lot better. The first matchup is the Texas Rangers at the Baltimore Orioles. Wandy Rodriguez is on the mound for the Rangers. Bud Norris is on the mound for the Orioles. Orioles trying to continue contending in the East. The East is very close. There's 4 teams competing for it, and then there's the Red Sox, who are really struggling. Wandy Rodriguez has the better ERA. He's been pitching average at best this year, but Bud Norris has really been struggling. I think that, and Baltimore's favored right now, so I kind of like the Rangers. I'm going to say that the Rangers win that one. I can't go with the run line since there is no -1.5. So the Rangers win it straight up. The next one is the Brewers, and Jimmy Nelson is on the mound for the Brewers versus the Philadelphia Phillies. It's at Philly. Sean O'Sullivan is on the mound for them. Milwaukee is favored in that matchup, just because Nelson's a little bit of a better pitcher, or so far on the year. The Phillies have just stunk. They've been they've been exactly what we expected them to be, which is a bad team. Good chance they'll have 100 losses at the end of this year. I guess I'll say the Brewers win by more than 1.5, but I don't feel too comfortable about it. Then you get the Red Sox at the Blue Jays. Clay Buchholz on the mound for the Red Sox, the one reliable guy, or relatively reliable. He's 5-6 on the year, so he's still struggling. But the Red Sox as a team have just been struggling. The Blue Jays are having a decent year. They're one of those teams contending in the East. And R.A. Dickey's on the mound for them. The knuckleballer who, he's struggled this year. His ERA is near 5. Toronto's favored just because of their lineup's better. They've played better all year. I'm actually going to say the Red Sox win this one. I think that Buchholz is the one guy who can get them righted a little bit. I still think that they're not a great team, but I think Buchholz is the key to getting a win tonight for them. Next up is the Twins at the Reds. The Twins have Mike Pelfrey on the mound. The Reds have Mike Leake. And the Reds are favored. It's in Cincy. Pelfrey's actually got the better ERA. He's been pitching very well all year long, 3.06. Mike Leake he's been good for the last few years, but his ERA is a little bit higher this year, 3.91. Not great. I'm gonna say that the Twins find a way to win this one. They've been on a tear so far this year. 40-35 for them is actually a pretty good record. They've struggled on the road, which is why they're not the favorite in this matchup, but I'm going to say they find a way to win tonight. Then you've got the Indians at the Rays. Indians have struggled a bit. They've got a new pitcher, Anderson, on the mound, making his first start of the year, facing up against Carnes, who's pitched well, 4-3 with a 3.28 ERA. Tampa Bay's favored because we don't know what to expect from Anderson, so therefore I'm going to pick the Rays just because I don't like the unexpected. I want to say the Rays win by more than 1.5, but, I could be wrong with a young pitcher coming out to dominate. We'll see what happens. Then you've got the Royals at the Astros. Joe Blanton on the mound, a 1.73 ERA, versus McCullers. McCullers with a 2.33. The Astros, both these teams have been stunning this year. Very good teams all year long. The Astros are favored. It's in Houston. It's a tough one for me. I'm going to say that the Royals win. I don't feel too comfortable about it, but I'm going to say that it happens. I'm picking a lot of road teams, I know, but it's just who I like going into tonight. The Dodgers at the Diamondbacks. Bolsinger on the mound for the Dodgers. The Diamondbacks have Adam Webster on the mound. The Dodgers are heavily favored. And I think the smart money's on them winning by more than 1.5. And I think I'm going to have to go with it. The Dodgers win by more than 1.5, so another road team for me. The Yankees are playing at the Angels. CC Sabathia on the mound versus CJ Wilson. Sabathia struggled all year long, 5.65 ERA. CJ Wilson with a 5-6 record, 3.92 ERA. I'm going to go with the Angels. They're favored, so I'm going to say minus 1.5. I like the Angels in that one, just because I don't like CC. It's rare that I pick against a pitcher, but in this matchup, I'm going to have to pick against CC. I just don't know what he has left in the tank at this point in his career. He's struggled mightily recently. The final matchup of the night is the Rockies at the Athletics. This game's at 10:05. Hale's on the mound for the Rockies. Graveman is on the mound for the Athletics. Graveman's a much better pitcher, 3.86 ERA so far this year. Oakland's heavily favored. It's in Oakland. Again, I'm going to pick the home team minus 1.5. I'm taking the A's. We'll see what happens in that matchup. If we're at Colorado, it might be different, but I'm taking Oakland in that one. And so we'll see what happens. So those are my picks for the week. We'll see what happens. I'm expecting to do a lot better than last week. And that's about it for this show, for this week's show. Next week we'll talk more about, of course, more baseball picks. We'll be nearing the midway point in the season. So we'll talk a little bit about that, a little bit about the All-Stars, All-Star Weekend, Home Run Derby, all that good stuff. We'll see what there is in the world of basketball with the free agents and who got picked up where, what's going to happen with that, who improved their odds the most with regards to free agency, if any big moves have been made. And we'll see what I can find with regards to football. And we'll talk Wimbledon, of course. We'll be halfway through in that tournament. We'll talk about who's left, what stunning upsets happened, if any. There's always a couple of big ones. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm glad you joined me on this episode 8 of Gamblers Anonymous. Thank you and have a good night.